Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome back to another episode of How People Behave. In this show, we look at understanding yourself and others better. My name's Peter Agnew.
And I'm Mark Hoare. Hello again.
Welcome back, and in this show we're exploring how people work together with different behaviours. We're sort of going to have a little bit of an explore on how people behave with each other, but more importantly, how other people view different behaviours of each other, Mark.
Yeah, and how other people impact you as well. So we're going to start off the first part of this episode with me asking you a question. So I'm going to bring the question up on screen now. And then what I want you to do is pause and give some reflection, and we'll get you to do this as well, Peter, okay? So if you're ready for this? Okay.
But just as a recap, don't forget what we're looking at is the DISC Profile program. And this is a Wiley product that pretty much breaks down behaviour into 4 behavioural styles, the D, I, S and the C. It is a model, and we use models to break down complexity. Will it explain everything about you? Probably not. But in this episode, we'll use the profile again to have a look at those differences between the styles. So Mark, our first question is a little bit around how you see people's behaviour.
So what I'd like you to do is, as it says there, is to think of someone that you've worked with, that you just got on with really, really well. It all clicked. It was a friendly, highly productive. It was a great relationship where there was no energy spent on worrying about how they were or you thinking about how you were with them. It just worked. So what I'd like you to do is write down the behaviors that you observed in that person. And remember to stay away from values, honest, punctual maybe, but, they had integrity. That's not behavior, that's a moral judgment. And so what we're looking at specifically is the behaviors of that person. So think of the person, put this on pause, and write down. And whilst that's happening, Peter, you'll have a go at this as well.
Great. Okay, Mark, I think I'm done with my list of behaviours.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is go to the next type of person. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. So what I want you to do now is to think of the exact opposite of the last type of person. So think of somebody that you've worked with in the past. It's important for you to have an effective relationship with that person, but somehow the relationship seems tense or strained, or it did seem. You may have worked with this person in the past. And just somehow it just seems or feels to be more difficult than it needs to be. Asking for a report is difficult, or I don't know, it just seems to be somehow tense. And again, think of the behaviors that you observe and how did that sort of play out as well. So again, pause and write that down as well. So
okay,
Peter, I think
you've a run now.
That's great.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Done my list.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So the first person that you got on really, really well with, what were the words that you had down to describe this person?
Yeah, so for me personally, I had things like optimistic, driven, open-minded, fairly hard-working, friendly, fairly action-orientated. Some of those sorts of things were things that I admire.
Okay, and what style? Having a guess, do you think? Did you ever know the profile of this person, or?
Yeah, not really, but
okay.
Just having a look at some of the words there, they're probably a little bit about the D and the I style in some ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
And looking at the person that you were challenged by, what behaviours did you notice there?
Yeah, so some of the words I've got for that person would be overly critical sometimes, a little bit negative, sometimes a bit too blunt, possibly stubborn would be a word I'd use, inflexible, sometimes a little bit of holding of grudges and so forth, and maybe not a great listener.
Okay, so what style do you think the two different people were?
This is probably a little bit more south of the board maybe, and probably around a DC style. Not that some of these words are a little bit exaggerated for the style, but there's probably sit within that occasionally, or probably down towards the C style occasionally.
And the first one, the person you got on with really well?
It was probably a DI style or an ID style.
And what do we conclude from that?
Yeah, probably it's the first one is probably a little bit towards my style, the style that I like to operate with. I think some people, when you say the word optimistic, some people will be saying, "Oh, optimistic, really?" That's one of those gushy sort of things that are a little bit overboard. Things like driven and open-minded, some people might say, well, that's great to have drive, but there's also got to be consideration for others as well. Yeah. So yeah, probably a little bit of some of the characteristics that I would see in myself in some ways, or my style.
And I mean, over your period as a facilitator, you would have done thousands of these. How often do you find that the people pick the person they like the most that is a reflection of their own style? Which, I mean, I know it's not empirical, it's anecdotal, but how often would you find that?
Yeah, probably most of the time. Yeah, it's probably something that we gravitate towards behaviours that we have ourselves in some ways, and also that other people have that we like. And probably some of those behaviours are things that naturally resonate with our own behaviours in some ways.
And one of the things I think that goes to explain that is that is because we don't need to adapt our behaviour. We can be who we are because the person we're being with is very similar to us. So there's no energy or effort needed to be expended to be adaptable. Yeah.
So if I got into a lift with an optimistic person and we start having a conversation about something that's fantastic happening in the news that day, that person would probably generate that optimism back to me in some ways, and there'd be a shared energy there in some respects. Yeah.
And then contrastingly, the style is you think sort of DC, that sort of challenging space.
Yeah, and I think it's more the words aren't necessarily an absolute of a DC. They're probably sometimes little bits of tendencies where it might be a little bit more seeing the environment as unfavourable, or a little bit more assessing of the environment. But for me, sometimes that behaviour will come across as critical or negative. And of course, we know that negativity and being critical is a really important skill in the workplace. But for me, sometimes I get agitated probably by that. Was probably something that's a good lesson that comes out.
And again, same sort of question is when we run this exercise, you know, I certainly found in the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, that I've done, is that, you know, typically a D will be most challenged by an S will be most challenged by a D, and I will be most challenged by a C, and vice versa. It seems there's a total lack of correlation diagonally opposite. Would you agree?
Yeah, in some instances that's
not always.
A good extrapolation to sort of say, well, when we start working out those little bits and pieces about how styles work together, we're sort of looking for little cues here about what's complementary and what's sometimes a little bit of a stretch for us to be able to work with. Yep. So probably as we go through this episode, you'll walk us through some of those styles. What are the ones that complement each other, and where, probably more importantly, how other people see your particular style as well is going to be part of it.
In fact, Peter and I were having a conversation about when partners obviously get together. That I have a theory that's certainly not empirical. It's just a theory that, you know, when we get together, we marry to complete each other. We don't marry to compete. And quite often, you'll find partners, you know, one will be a D, one will be an S, or one will be a DI, one will be an SC. And now I'm on the lookout for that, so I can see if we can come back to you with some more empirical data on that, but we'll find out, that's for sure.
And it'd be good even to challenge some of that as well, as we go through. And even in one of our future episodes where we start looking at interpersonal compatibility between styles, that's a really important thing. How do styles get on with each other will be good to look at. But let's start walking through some of the styles and how they're perceived by others. I think we're going to start up on the north side of the
Excuse me.
So the D style is that sort of faster pace. They're a little bit more assessing of the environment, a bit more task focused, so it can come across as a little bit blunt by others. Also, the speed is important for them, and getting results and driving for results is important. So in this section, we're looking at you describing to us, how do other people perceive that style? I know as a D style, Ds, when they get a D style, they're high fives, yeah, I'm a D and all that sort of stuff. But there's a lot of other people sitting in the room looking at them saying, wow, you're a D, but this is how I see you in that particular area. So let's have a look at how Ds see themselves in some ways probably first.
So in one of the episodes, we will go into the report in a bit more detail, but it starts in the report on page 8, and it actually gives you a narrative that describes the type of person that Peter's just explained.
So this is a DISC profile
This
report?
is the DISC profile,
great.
The workplace report. So what we've got on screen, and you can see this here, is the D style. So the shaded quadrant that we're looking at is the green quadrant. So that's the piece that we're actually looking at. And where the dot is, that's the view of the person with the dot looking at other people who are Ds. Is that cool? Okay, so what happens is in this little narrative box underneath, other Ds see other Ds as driven, competitive, forceful, and strong-willed. And they like that.
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah,
what they are. So they appreciate the fact that they don't take hours to make decisions. They like the fact they want to get things done. The competitiveness they also like because it drives them.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit Bryn.ai or search the App Store today.